What's up guys, Summation Kid here. In this video I'm going to go over all the rules I'm going to be following for the upcoming Genshin Impact Ironman run. So that means we're going to try to get to, well, originally it was supposed to be Adventure Rank 60, but I think a more realistic goal is completing the Spiral Abyss. So we're going to try to complete the entire Spiral Abyss up to and including floor 12 with PERMADEATH enabled. That just means whenever any character dies, they stay dead. Without further ado, let's get started on the rules. So the first rule, of course, is permadeath. Once again, that means whenever a character is downed, they can't be played anymore from then on out until the challenge ends. So this time around, I've decided to define death as whenever that sort of fading out animation plays, where the character kind of turns into stardust and floats up into the sky, the same animation that plays whenever enemy NPCs die. So for example, death from combat damage, environmental damage, so that's like fall damage, exploding barrels. By the way, just an interesting aside for those who don't know, it certainly took me a while to notice this, but those exploding barrels you often see in holotroll camps, they're actually just barrels with pyro slime stuffed in them. In fact, one of the commissions, the regular commissions that you get sent on, is actually to go to one of these holotroll exploding barrel manufacturing grounds places and stop said holotrolls from manufacturing exploding barrels. Anyway, status effects. If we die from that, that also counts as a death, of course. So if you're burning, if you're standing in electro-charged water, or actually, would that be environmental damage? Well, I guess if the character is electro-charged, then that's a status effect, but if they're standing in electro-charged water, then that's environmental damage, right? But the important thing is, in either case, that would count as a character death. And this time we're going to add drowning. So for the last run, drowning didn't count as a death because, well, the reasoning back then was that when a character drowned, they didn't get downed, right? They just respawned nearby on land with a little bit of lost HP, but the quote-unquote death animation does actually play when you drown, so I've decided this time to include drowning as a death. So if a character drowns, that character can't be played anymore, even though they're not actually downed. As for quote-unquote not death, the only thing I could really think of was if you fall outside the map. Typically that happens in domains, and the reason I count this as not death is, well, number one, it can happen due to a bug, just randomly, and number two, because the fading out animation, where again your character turns into stardust and floats away, that doesn't play. So my headcanon is that, their vision power just allows them to teleport back into the realm or something like that. Okay, so that's all rule number one, permadeath. Rule number two is completely free to play. So this is the same as last time. Once again, no Welkin, no battle pass, no Genesis crystals, etc. Fairly straightforward. Just don't spend any kind of real money on the account. Rule number three, no statue healing again. So that means all the statues are turned off, they do not auto heal, and we also cannot use them to manually heal. Rule number four, no buff foods and no healing foods when in combat. So this just means we can't eat any foods that give us combat buffs. So, foods that increase your attack, crit rate, crit damage, defense, healing bonus, shield strength, etc., etc. And we can't eat any healing food, so foods that restore HP, when you are in combat. Now, the reason I decided to allow this out of combat is because it's literally the exact same thing as waiting for Barbara's E to finish cooling down. So this basically just speeds up the time without really reducing the quote-unquote difficulty of the game. So that'll be available once I actually get Barbara, right? But before I get Barbara, then allowing healing food actually makes the run easier. So no healing food until we get Barbara. And of course, or any E healer, right? Because if the healer requires attacking or bursts to heal, then you can't just keep doing that unless you fight something. And if we fight something, then of course there is a chance that we'll die, right? So I hope that was all clear. Moving on now. Rule number 5, no running away from combat. So simple enough, it's pretty easy to just get out of any dangerous situation by running away. So we're not going to allow that. And instead we have to fight to the death, quote unquote, whenever we aggro any enemies. Rule number 6, no teleporting when in combat. Again, you can just pause the game and teleport out of danger, which is super cheesy, so we're not going to allow that. Basically, if the combat music is playing, we can't teleport. Even if there's like a random enemy NPC just aggroed on us and we can't even find it, well, we just have to find it and get rid of it. And then we can teleport. Rule number 7 is no artifact domains. So this is subject to change, but for now I'm going to try to do the run without doing any artifact domains. The reason for this rule is because I feel like you can farm really overpowered artifacts, and when you get to the point when you have godly artifacts, of course different people have different definitions of godly, but the point is, once you have good artifacts, the Spiral Abyss isn't really all that hard to complete. Of course, we could just raise the challenge for this run to 12-star Spiral Abyss, but that just kind of makes the entire process unnecessarily grindy. So I'm just going to go for completing the Spiral Abyss, not necessarily getting all the stars, but at the same time also not grinding artifacts. Rule number 8. So no farming normal bosses. This is kind of similar to no artifact domains because you get artifacts from farming normal bosses. So we're only going to kill normal bosses if we actually need character ascension materials. And weekly bosses, of course, are excluded because you can do them, a limited number of times. That is to say, once a week. And of course, they get billets, right? So we always want billets since we don't have access to event weapons, right? So the only 4-star, or at least the main source of 4-star weapons, is going to be crafting them. Rule number 9. This just means we have to raise the world level as soon as possible. Which is, I think that's also cheesy to just stay on the same world level, because you could theoretically get to adventure rank, or rather you could theoretically accumulate enough XP to get to adventure rank 55 while staying on world level 1. And of course, rule number 10, no co-op, right? We're not, because that kind of defeats the entire purpose of an Ironman run, because we can just have somebody carry us in co-op, right? So obviously, no co-op. And I guess I'll go over the changes from last time as well as the reasoning behind those changes. So before we allowed no deaths at all across the entire account, right? And of course we died in Stormterror's lair by crashing into a barrier, and that was the end of that run. So this time, instead of not allowing any deaths at all whatsoever, we'll just say any characters that die are permanently dead, and we can't use those characters. Of course we can replenish characters by wishing, but still, there's a limited number of characters, so it's still quite a challenge. The challenge aspect, and I guess the quote-unquote danger of dying is still very much there. Number 2, drowning. So last time we said that drowning was okay because it didn't cause your character to become downed. But after I drowned once last run, it really did feel like that should have counted as a death. So this time we're going to count drowning as a death. So if a character drowns, then we can't use that character again for the duration of the run. And of course, we changed the goal. So last time it was get to adventure rank 60, which is kind of unfeasible. So we're going to shoot for a more realistic, complete the Spiral Abyss. Because, well, another thing is you can get to adventure rank 60 by just, again, doing really safe things like farming the unusual hilichurl or just staying at world level 1 or something like that. So now the goal is to complete the Spiral Abyss, which is actually hard, especially if you're not farming artifact domains. Anyway, moving on. This time healing food will be allowed out of combat, again because I feel like once you have an E-healer, so a healer that can heal using their elemental skill, then allowing yourself to eat healing food is just speeding up the process, and it doesn't actually make the run easier, right? Because instead of just waiting for the skill to cool down, you're just, you're healing up and spending less time so you can do more dangerous stuff, which is the point of the run, right? So we're going to allow wishing. That means if characters die, like if all your starter characters die, you can still continue the run. But the fact that, once a character dies, they're permanently dead, that's still like a huge blow, right? Especially if it's like a 5-star. So this way, I think it's going to be more entertaining. It's going to be less quote-unquote hardcore, but it's going to be more realistic. So I think overall it will be a more entertaining run if we allow wishing but keep the permadeath. So that's all the rules for the second Ironman run. Again, these are all subject to change. I mean, 2 of them are marked as subject to change, but if you guys feel like any of these rules should be changed, leave a comment, shoot me a message. If a lot of you have the same suggestion, then I will definitely change that rule for the next run. So that's it for this video. I hope that was pretty clear on what all the rules that I will be following are, and I will see you guys in the next video when the run actually starts. I should probably come up with some kind of closing line. Ad Astra Abyssosk. Well, anyway, see you guys in the next video, and I hope you enjoy the runs.